Hey everyone, welcome back. We're diving into some malicious compliance stories. Today we've got 3 tales of people who tried to get free labor, ignore reality, or override experience and discovered that rules, physics, and consequences don't care about titles. One involves an IT worker who wasn't on call but was expected to answer anyway. Another, a bakery manager who demanded the impossible from a raspberry stain. And the last, a production manager who thought he could run a plant without overtime. Here we go. I wasn't on the paid on-call rotation, but my boss expected me to work emergencies anyway. Several years ago, I worked in IT for a medium-sized company in southern Germany. Our department had around 20 people, neatly structured so that every technical area had 2 specialists assigned. There were 2 for servers, 2 for databases, and in my case, 2 for networking and firewalls. The pairing system worked well because if one person was out sick or on vacation, the other could handle emergencies without the whole company grinding to a halt. Because of labor laws in our country, no employee could legally be forced into a strict 24/7 on-call rotation every couple of weeks. However, the company absolutely required someone to be reachable for major outages, so we had what everyone called a gentleman's agreement. In exchange for about €500 per month, we would be informally on call. The rules were relaxed compared to formal emergency services. We didn't have to answer within minutes, and it wasn't expected that we would be logged in and working immediately. The calls were rare, usually 2 or 3 per team each year, so most of us considered it decent compensation for the psychological burden of knowing the phone might ring. When I joined the company, I was the junior in the network/firewall pair. For the first couple of years, I wasn't included in the agreement. At the time, I didn't mind much because I was still learning the environment, and my senior partner handled the rare incidents. But after about 2 years, I was fully up to speed. I knew the systems, had all the access, and could resolve most issues on my own. That's when things got irritating. During a planning meeting, my higher-level boss casually said, "If something happens while Marcus is on vacation, we'll just call him," meaning me. He said it as if it were the most obvious solution in the world. My direct supervisor shot me a look because we both knew I wasn't part of the paid on-call agreement, yet somehow I was being treated like I was. They wanted you on call without pay, just a casual assumption that you'd pick up when it was convenient for them. That's not a gentleman's agreement, that's just taking. The first time it actually happened, there was a company-wide IT issue late on a Saturday. Instead of my higher boss calling me himself, he sent one of my colleagues to do it. My phone rang and I answered, already knowing what this was about. "Hey, we got a serious problem," my coworker said. "We need you to jump in." I paused and replied calmly, "I'm not on call." There was an awkward silence. He knew it, I knew it, and everyone else probably knew it too. "Yeah, but," he started. I cut him off gently. "I'm sorry, but I'm not part of the on-call agreement." I hung up, feeling guilty, knowing they would struggle with fewer people. But I also knew that stepping in would permanently cement the expectation that I'd work for free whenever it suited management. After that weekend, I decided to solve the problem in my own way. If they didn't want to officially put me on call, they wouldn't be able to reach me. I changed my mobile number and gave it only to my network partner, who agreed the situation was unfair. If anyone asked him for my number, he would simply say he didn't have it. I disconnected my rarely used landline and informed HR that in emergencies they could reach my parents' number, but only for genuine emergencies, not routine work issues. Then I waited. The moment arrived about 3 months later. My partner was out of the country on holiday, hiking somewhere in Austria. I enjoyed a peaceful weekend, went cycling, and didn't think about work once. Monday morning, I walked into the office and immediately sensed tension. People were whispering, servers were rebooting. My boss looked exhausted. "What happened?" I asked, already guessing. "The firewall went crazy," someone replied. "The main network interface kept flapping up and down. Everything crashed Saturday night." It turned out that the firewall, our main gateway to the outside world, had a failing network interface. No one else had admin access except my partner and me. Without access credentials or deep system knowledge, they had to call in external vendor support. The specialist billed emergency weekend rates and spent almost 2 full days diagnosing and stabilizing the system. Critical financial calculations didn't run on schedule, and several departments were furious. I was summoned into my direct supervisor's office. He closed the door and skipped the small talk. "This can't happen again," he said bluntly. "You're going on call immediately. I'll sort it out with HR and upper management later. Just make sure you're reachable starting today." I didn't argue. I handed over my new mobile number and nodded. Within a week, everything was formalized. I received the same 500 euros per month as everyone else. No one questioned it again. The irony was that other departments often complained about our easy bonus money. They saw the 500 euros and assumed we were getting paid for nothing. I always told them I would happily give it back if it meant complete personal freedom. After taxes, it worked out to roughly 3,400 euros per year. That sounds nice until you realize it means you can never fully relax. Even on vacation, you check signal strength. Even at dinner, your phone stays face up. A few years later, I left for a standard 8 to 16 IT job with no on-call obligations. The salary was similar, but the mental difference was enormous. When I close my laptop now, I'm done. No background anxiety, no wondering if a firewall interface is about to fail at 2 a.m. For me, that peace of mind was worth far more than 500 euros a month. The company lost a weekend, paid emergency vendor rates, and faced angry departments, all because they wanted to save 500 euros a month on a guy who already knew the systems. In the end, they got exactly what they needed to realize they were being stupid. And our second story. The bakery manager wanted the stain gone. She got her wish. Years ago, before I found my way into better paying work, I had a job as a dishwasher and part-time janitor at a busy neighborhood bakery in Columbus. The official title on paper was something vague like kitchen support, but in reality, my entire existence revolved around cleaning. I washed sheet pans crusted with caramelized sugar, scrubbed mixing bowls that weighed more than my car, mopped floors slick with butter, and sanitized every surface that could possibly attract a health inspector's attention. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work, and I took pride in doing it well. The bakery itself was popular and chaotic, especially during holiday seasons. We churned out everything from croissants to custom cakes, and the kitchen looked like a battlefield by the end of each shift. Flour dust floated permanently in the air, icing hardened in corners like cement, and fruit fillings seemed to migrate to places no fruit filling had any right to be. My manager, whom I'll call Laura, ran the place with a mix of high-strung energy and selective memory. She liked things spotless, but had a tendency to forget how materials and physics actually worked. One afternoon during a particularly busy shift, someone managed to spill a massive glob of raspberry filling underneath the wall-mounted hand-washing sink. It wasn't just a little splash, it was a thick, bright red smear that stretched from the backsplash down toward the baseboard. By the time I was called over, it had already started to dry into a sticky neon scar. Laura pointed at it like she'd just discovered a crime scene. "Can you scrape that off and sanitize the wall?" she asked. I grabbed a plastic scraper, a bucket of hot soapy water, and disinfectant. First, I carefully removed the excess filling, which came off in sticky, gelatinous strips. Then I scrubbed the area thoroughly and wiped it down with sanitizer. When I stepped back, the surface was clean in terms of food residue, but the wall itself was still pinkish. Raspberry filling, as I learned that day, is essentially a dye masquerading as dessert. It had soaked straight into the paint. Laura came back to inspect it and frowned. "Why is it still stained?" "Because it stained the paint," I explained calmly. "I got all the filling off. If I scrub any harder, I'm going to take the paint off the wall. And if it's soaked in this deep, the drywall underneath is probably tinted too." She crossed her arms. "It doesn't look clean. Scrub it harder." I tried once more to reason with her. The wall is painted with standard interior latex. That stuff isn't meant to be aggressively scrubbed. I can sanitize it all day, but the color isn't going anywhere unless we repaint. She didn't want to hear it. "Just scrub it," she said, already turning away. "Make it look clean." So I scrubbed. I went at that wall with the kind of enthusiasm you reserve for a stubborn pan that's burned beyond recognition. Sponge, brush, more hot water, degreaser, sanitizer. I leaned into it, applying real pressure. Within a few minutes, I saw the inevitable happen. The paint began to dull, then thin, then peel. The bright bakery white finish started to flake away, revealing the dull grayish drywall beneath. The pink tint from the raspberry filling was still faintly visible, just as I had predicted. "You told her exactly what would happen. She told you to scrub harder anyway, so you did. Now the wall matches your prediction perfectly." Since I'd been told to scrub harder, I didn't stop when the paint came off. I kept going until the entire stained section was stripped down to raw drywall in a rough, uneven patch. It looked like someone had attacked the wall with sandpaper. By the time I was done, there was no filling residue, no gloss, and definitely no intact paint in that area. It was sanitized, though, spotless from a hygiene perspective. Laura returned about 20 minutes later and froze. "What happened to the wall?" she demanded. "You told me to scrub harder," I replied evenly, "so I did." She stepped closer, touching the rough surface where the paint used to be. "You scrubbed too hard. The paint is ruined." I shrugged. I mentioned that would happen. Raspberry filling stained the paint. The only way to get rid of the color was to remove the paint. She muttered something about carelessness and walked off in a huff. I went back to washing sheet pans, resisting the urge to point out that the wall was now technically cleaner than it had been in years. Over the next week, that ugly gray patch sat there as a silent reminder that cleaning doesn't magically reverse chemistry. Now she's surprised. After you warned her twice. The stain's gone, along with the paint. Exactly what you said would happen. You just followed instructions. Eventually, maintenance had to come in and repaint the entire section of wall so it would match the rest of the kitchen. It cost more in labor and materials than a small can of touch-up paint would have if she'd simply accepted the stain in the first place. No one apologized to me, of course. The narrative quietly shifted to, we needed to repaint anyway. I learned something useful from that job. When someone with authority insists on a solution that ignores basic reality, sometimes the only way forward is to follow instructions exactly as given. The wall ended up cleaner than clean, just not prettier. And every time I saw that freshly painted section afterward, I remembered that sometimes you can scrub as hard as you want, but you can't bully a raspberry into unexisting. This is such a perfect example of clean versus looks clean. You did exactly what your job required. Remove the food, sanitize the surface, make it hygienic. The stain was cosmetic, but some managers can't separate appearance from reality. If it doesn't look pristine, they assume the job wasn't done properly. The irony is that you explained the chemistry calmly and clearly. You weren't being lazy, you were being realistic. Once she pushed past reason and into just make it look clean, she basically ordered the paint off the wall. And that's exactly what she got. You didn't ruin it, you followed instructions to their logical end. And our last story. I cost the company $120K in one day. About 8 years ago, I was a supervisor at a large meat processing plant just outside Omaha. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid well, and most of us on the floor took pride in running a tight operation. My department alone had about 70 employees under me, and across the plant, there were roughly 220 hourly workers spread across multiple production rooms. We processed and packaged product on strict schedules, and when the lines ran smoothly, the money flowed. When they didn't, it was like lighting stacks of cash on fire. For the most part, management understood the rhythm of the place. We dealt with a constant churn of vacation requests, sick calls, family emergencies, and the occasional no-call, no-show. With a workforce that size, being down a few people wasn't unusual. We averaged about 7 call-ins per day, and at any given time, around 10% of the staff was on approved vacation. Overtime wasn't a luxury. It was the pressure valve that kept production stable. It wasn't abused, but it was absolutely necessary. Then corporate hired a new production manager. I'll call him Derek. Derek didn't come up through operations. He had an engineering degree and a resume filled with efficiency buzzwords. On his first day, he gathered all the supervisors into the conference room and announced he was going to right the ship. I remember glancing around the table, wondering which ship he thought was sinking. We were hitting targets, meeting quotas, and passing audits, but Derek had decided we were hemorrhaging money. His first decree was simple and absolute. Effective immediately, there will be no more overtime, he said, tapping a spreadsheet projected on the wall. We're wasting thousands every week. I raised my hand and asked, what about vacation coverage, sick calls, leave of absence? We averaged 7 call-ins a day. He didn't hesitate. No OT, no exceptions, staff better. The tone made it clear he wasn't interested in discussion. After the meeting, I pulled him aside. I laid out the numbers calmly. Next week alone, I've got 12 people on vacation, and historically, we'll lose another 5 to 7 to sick calls. We'll be short close to 20 bodies. He crossed his arms and said, then adjust your schedule. Figure it out. Overtime is lazy management. That was the moment I realized he'd never spent a single shift on a production floor at 4:30 in the morning trying to hit a deadline with 20 pallets waiting. That Friday, I made one last attempt. I walked into his office with the staffing sheet in hand. We're going to be short 19 people next week, I said plainly. If you don't approve overtime, we won't be able to run all lines. He didn't even look up from his screen. No overtime, he repeated. I thought about escalating to his boss, a plant director I'd known for a decade, but part of me wanted Derek to feel the consequences of his own decisions. Word spread quickly among the crew. A few veteran operators approached me in the locker area. Boss, you sure there's no OT next week? One of them asked. Overtime shifts were good money for them. I shrugged and told him, that's the directive. Derek wants it that way. They exchanged looks but didn't argue. They'd seen management experiments before. Monday morning arrived like a slow-moving train wreck. By 7 a.m., it was obvious we didn't have enough hands. 2 of our primary production lines sat dark. The conveyors were still, the cutting stations unmanned, the packaging crews non-existent. Derek came storming down the aisle, his hard hat crooked and his face already red. Why aren't lines 3 and 4 running? He barked. Is it mechanical downtime? I kept my voice steady. No mechanical issues. We don't have the staff to run them. He sputtered something about planning and leadership. You're supposed to anticipate this, he snapped. I reminded him in front of 2 other supervisors. I asked multiple times for overtime approval. You said no each time. I followed your direction. His jaw clenched. Get some people in here, he yelled, loud enough for half the room to hear. At that point, there was no magic button to push. I started calling people at home, asking if they could come in. Some were an hour away, others had already made plans. We salvaged part of the afternoon, but those 2 lines never ran that day. By accounting's estimate, shutting those lines for a single shift cost the company around $120,000 in lost production and delayed shipments. That number didn't even include the penalties from clients expecting on-time delivery. He created the problem, then blamed you for not fixing it fast enough. You did exactly what he asked. No overtime. Now he's standing in front of 2 dark lines worth $120,000 in lost production, and he has no one to point at but himself. Later that week, I was outside by the loading dock having a cigarette when the plant director joined me. He looked exhausted. What the hell was he thinking? He muttered, shaking his head. I thought engineers were supposed to be good with numbers. I nearly choked laughing. I told him I documented every conversation about overtime. He nodded and flicked ash onto the concrete. Good, he said. Keep documenting. Over the next few weeks, Derek tried to recover by quietly approving limited overtime, but the damage was done. Supervisors had lost confidence in him, and the floor crew had zero respect for directives that changed by the day. Corporate doesn't love 6-figure mistakes that could have been avoided by listening to people who actually run the operation. Meetings were held behind closed doors, spreadsheets were reviewed, voices were raised. Derek lasted about 3 months before he was transitioned out. The official line was that he was pursuing other opportunities. Around the plant, nobody bothered pretending. The same overtime system went right back into place, balanced and controlled the way it had been before he arrived with his grand plan. The ship had never needed saving in the first place. It just needed someone smart enough not to drill holes in the hull to prove a point. 3 managers, 3 bad decisions, 3 different flavors of consequences. The IT boss wanted on-call coverage without paying for it. When the OP made himself unreachable, a weekend firewall failure cost emergency vendor rates and torpedoed department schedules. The company learned that €500 a month is cheaper than a single crisis. The bakery manager wanted a raspberry stain gone, ignored the warning about paint chemistry, and ended up with a stripped wall that required professional repainting. She got exactly what she asked for. The stain disappeared, along with the paint. The production manager banned overtime despite clear warnings about staffing shortages. 2 production lines sat dark for a full shift. $120,000 in lost product and delayed shipments. He was gone within months. The overtime policy returned. No one missed him. 3 stories, 1 question. Which manager deserved their outcome most? Hey guys, thank you all for watching the video. I'll see you in the next one.